the Fireside Tattoo Podcast, the official podcast of the Fireside Tattoo Network. I'm Jake. This is Charlie C. So why do you go about just Charlie C? Is it a hard last name to pronounce, or do you just like try to stay anonymous?
Well, I shortened my last name to C because the way it's spelled, some people always throw H's in it, so they'll either say Chung, Sung, whatever, instead of my actual last name.
Okay.
So then I just kept it at the C.
Just to make it easy.
Make it easy, yeah.
So we were just talking about your transition. We don't want to talk down about anyone. We were just talking about your transition over here from other shops. And do you think that and so obviously you had, I don't know if we got much of this audio before we started rolling, but you had an experience where you were mentored by someone, and then you moved to a shop, and then they held a grudge against you, and you guys don't talk anymore. Do you feel like that's a mindset that's kind of going away in tattooing now, or do you still see a lot of it in this area? I feel like in my area, I don't see a lot of that, not as much as I did 10 or 15 years ago. I feel like there's more cooperation between shops than there used to be.
I do see a good cooperation between shops.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see that firsthand about the beef with people and the owners or whoever they used to work for.
Yeah.
But I've heard from friends that has happened too, like a couple years ago. So still kind of common, but not as much.
Yeah. I hope not. I hate to hear that kind of stuff, because just like, I don't know, I feel like it's an industry that's grown to a point where there's enough room for everybody if you're willing to put in the work. And you hate to see people who are like, who are upset for you trying to make a better opportunity or grow as an artist, step up to a better shop, stuff like that, which obviously you've done by ending up here. So you are doing mostly kind of pattern, blackwork, dotwork, a lot of stippling, and you said you started doing it around 2009, which was early on, and obviously that stylistically that has just taken off. There's a lot of it, some really good examples of it, and then some really great artists that are doing it, and then others that I feel like probably have jumped on because of its popularity and are trying to find maybe an easy way out. Maybe they think, I can get away with doing this and not having to learn how to draw. Do you see that a lot?
Yes.
So what do you think separates guys like you from people who are just trying to ride on the coattails of a style that they see that's on its way up, or that's popular now?
I would say the difference between me and the people that are jumping on the style is I started off doing other styles. So I started off doing traditional stuff. Mm-hmm. So because I have the traditional roots, then I'm able to mix that with my stuff and make it something different. Because there is a drawing aspect to it, compared to a lot of new guys that are just making patterns off of the computer and not adding their own flair to it. They're pretty much letting a system make the things for them.
Yeah. You see the exact same, like, repetitive pattern, like the same patterns that you see that are probably on the first page of Google whenever you pull up Google image, and you see them like thrown into hundreds or thousands of sleeves, where like literally I'll be flipping through some people who are actually doing decent work, and I'm like, it looks like they kind of gave up on that part, because I've seen that little section of pattern 1,000 times. So but you try to draw all of it yourself?
Yes. I try to draw everything based on a basic shape, and then I build off of that basic shape.
So, and most of what you're doing is pretty large scale now, right?
Yes.
Looking at your Instagram, it looks like most everything is. So are you designing? Okay, so let's say yesterday I was in here and you were starting a sleeve, but you basically just laid out one piece of it, right? You were just doing the forearm, like a little kind of a forearm flower. Do you have the rest of it planned out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so describe that process just a little bit. How did you know where to set that piece to make sure that everything else is going to work?
Okay, so the way I set everything is I'll draw the shape for that area of the body, and then I'll make sure each of the points align with the body. Okay. So when it aligns, I know that whatever I connect next to it, it's going to match up.
Gotcha.
So I draw some grids on the body, so I know what center everywhere and what curves and where things will overlap, and then I'll just connect it that way.
Yeah. And that's and the reason for that, I guess, because you probably could rough in, say, half of that sleeve or lay it all out at once, but it would be unfinished and probably wouldn't look great in between sittings. Is that the reason you try to completely finish one area of it and then stack the next area against it?
Well, normally I don't do that.
Oh, okay.
But I did that yesterday because we only had a small amount of time with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's all just, so you would prefer to lay the entire thing out on the front end?
No, I do it in pieces, because sometimes my ideas change a little bit, so then I want to leave room for adjustment.
Okay. So like, if you had had a full day with this guy yesterday, and I wonder, do you have photos of that piece just so maybe we could drop in while we're talking about it?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on Instagram.
Okay, cool. So we'll grab that and maybe drop it in so people know what we're talking about. So if you had a full day with him yesterday, what would you have done?
Yesterday, if it was a full day for him, I will for sure have the elbow. Because that's one of the hardest parts that people have trouble with. Is they have trouble with aligning a point on the outside and on the inside. But I figured out a way to make it so where it lines up on the outside and the inside and in the center.
Oh, okay.
So that's the focal point to me, because that's what everyone kind of notices, and you can tell where it's the most messed up.
Yeah.
So I'll start with the bottom, and I'll start growing up. But on the first day, if it's a full day, it'll be from the elbow pretty much down.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll have the inside in, sometimes I won't. It just depends on what I want on top of each other.
Gotcha. So you'll start with the elbow in mind first, make sure that's lined up.
Yeah.
That's funny because it makes perfect sense. But you think about so many other tattooers, myself included, who are doing large scale work. I'm trying my best to like do the least amount of detail work in the elbow.
Yeah.
So it's the thing that I draw around, or I make a big sweeping shape that
that's how I try to change.
Yeah.
I try to change it. Yeah.
Do you want to share any of your trick of how you line it up or no?
Well, same thing, draw grids.
Okay.
And I make sure one point hits on one side, and then I just move it just slightly so the other point fits on the other side.
Okay.
Because the elbow is not necessarily a flat plane, so you won't tell if it's crooked or not. You just notice if it's aligned or not.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And people are always
moving.
Yeah, you're rarely.
You're never straight. You're always like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are you stenciling with people in a kind of a natural position normally? Yeah. So talk just a little bit about as much as you feel comfortable talking about the technique itself. I know you were saying you use all coil machines.
Use all coil. Yeah.
Have you tried to do dot work with rotaries and haven't been successful, or what do you?
So I've tried rotaries, and I've done the technique where you slow down the machine and you do circles or you whip it out, and to me it looks fine in the first couple of years, first couple of months, but then the dots that get kind of whipped away kind of just fade. So what I do is I do it like the old art technique, where if you want it to look lighter, you put less dots. If you want to look darker, you put more dots. And by doing it individual and using only black, it actually lasts a lot longer.
Okay. And so you prefer doing that with a coil machine just because of the consistency of the mark or whatever?
Yeah, it's consistent, and it's a little bit easier on the skin as far as pain-wise, I think.
Yeah. Let's go. So when you're making these marks, I assume, like I haven't done much dot work in tattooing at all, but I did do a lot of that stippling in high school art and stuff like that, like the pen and ink kind of stippling. And it's I remember it being really tedious to get a consistent blend that peppers out just right without really like slowing way down. I feel like that, having not done this style much, I think probably one of the big differences between people who are successful at it and people that aren't is how much time they're willing to take to in constantly looking at the area and placing intentional dots.
Yeah.
Is that the majority of it?
Yeah, but I have like a little trick that I do to kind of keep it all looking the same.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What is, you want to tell the trick?
Well, a lot of people, they'll start with dark to light. I'll do light to dark. Okay. And that way, you know how much area you want it to be like a certain tone or a certain shade. And then when you get to the darker part, you can kind of just go crazy, and it's going to be dark anyways. So you're not going to tell.
So you're like, you'll start with like the lightest area of the pepper, and will you kind of build that all the way through, and then just slowly start to build up the darks?
Well, when I do the lights, it's slower, but as I get down, it kind of just speeds up, and that's how I get it done.
Yeah. What drew you to it in the first? Because it's basically exclusively what you do, huh? I mean, what drew you to it in the first place? And would you like to do other things at all, or is it something you think you'll focus on indefinitely?
How I got into it was in 2009, and back then I was really into like body modifications and like, stuff like that. And a lot of my friends were piercers, and they all had blackwork and patterns, and that interested me. Yeah. So I just wanted to start drawing it, and I remember my mentor would make fun of me if I wanted to draw it, saying it would get me nowhere. But I just wanted to prove him wrong, and that's pretty much how I got into it.
Why do you think that was? Now that you say it, I recognize that the piercers all just had a lot of blackworks because they were like. What was the reason for that? Any idea?
I'm not too sure. I never really asked them why. I just noticed that all of them really had it.
Yeah. I hadn't made the connection, but when you say it, I can think of a lot of piercers early on. That was some of the early kind of dot work and big, heavy kind of blackout stuff that I saw was mostly on on piercers. It's funny. We were doing an episode recently a couple weeks ago with Guy Aitchison, and we were talking about how styles kind of come and go. And I was saying something about how traditional kind of like we were talking about tribal, how it had kind of fallen off in the late '90s, and how it how it hasn't in the '90s since hasn't come back like a lot of other styles have. And he's like, well, I think it's just kind of evolved in different ways. Like I think that a lot of this dot work and a lot of the big kind of pattern-based stuff is kind of the evolution of what we were doing, in the early and mid '90s. You think that's kind of an evolution of that style?
Yeah, I feel so because a lot of my flow is based on tribal.
Yeah, yeah. And so go back for just a second to your layout. You say you draw everything on a grid. But when you're drawing to the body, like the shape of a body is very asymmetrical. If you're drawing a sleeve, you've got sweeping shapes that don't necessarily follow a grid super easily. So when you lay a grid out, are you like blocking in like the shape of a deltoid or a tricep and trying to make that line or that line, or do you like from the most general start of it?
Okay.
How does that grid start?
So what I mean by grid is I'll make my own version of a grid on that person's body.
Okay.
So like on the muscle right here, I'll know that there'll be like a little curve here, so I'll add a curve there. But then I'll also add a center line, so I know what's going to be in the center.
Okay.
So that's pretty much like how my grid is.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So the grid is for each individual part,
person,
and then as a whole, they need to make sense together.
Yeah, it has to all make sense together.
Yeah, yeah. And so, do you ever find yourself like when you come in, you do this every day, and obviously it's a style that can get really tedious, and like you don't ever find yourself going like, man, I would love to tattoo just a plain rose today and just color it red.
No. I like the tedious work because it keeps me busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back before we jumped in 2009 and getting into tattooing. What was your art background before you got into tattooing?
Before I got into tattooing, my art background was graphic design and video.
Okay.
So I used to do graphic design, video, sound for Boys and Girls Club. And that was like my first job ever in high school.
Yeah.
And just kind of like doodling and stuff like that when I was a kid.
Yeah. You talked a little bit before we got on today about kind of a background in photography.
Yeah.
And that's obviously looking at your Instagram page. All your photos are super clean. That's something that I have never really learned, and I just depend on the same things that a lot of people do, like Instagram, fixing a lot of what I don't photograph. Well, not changing not adjusting it where it's fake, but trying to make it look like it actually looks.
Yeah.
Do you have any photography tips for tattooers that struggle with taking photos?
Yeah. Don't center everything.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of keep everything a little bit off to the side, so there's like a little bit of balance. Because when things are in the center, you kind of get bored at looking at it. So it doesn't interest your eyes. But when your eyes is directed at one point, you want to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. What about as far as lighting, avoiding glares, photographing fresh tattoos? I know yesterday you set up and photographed just right here. Under fluorescent lights. Yeah, you have like 3 different temperatures of light right over here.
So yesterday was a little bit different because there was natural sunlight also. Okay. So the natural sunlight kind of like, I guess, X'd out that light.
Yeah.
But there is a certain filter that you can use that cuts down glare, but I haven't really used it lately because I just kind of just shoot at the right time.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, or you can use flashes. You can use flashes with like diffusers, and what the diffuser does, it makes, instead of being spotlights, it'll just make one giant light, so there'll be no glare.
Yeah. The only thing that I've found that works, and you're not photographing with your camera, with your phone or anything. You're photographing with a camera and just editing and uploading everything later, huh? Yeah, I think a lot of us are using phones.
Just want, instant reaction.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing that I feel like has helped me the most is just to break down as slow as I possibly can, and make the person sit there for 20 minutes with like Bactine rags all over them.
Yeah, that helps too.
And then I know that everyone's ready to go home, and I'm just like cleaning up my station, doing everything I can to drag it out as long as possible. And that's my photography tip, but don't listen to mine. So talk to us. So your girlfriend's a tattooer, right?
Yep.
As well. But you guys don't work together. You were saying yesterday you didn't have any interest in doing that.
No.
Do you? And I looked when I was on your page. I think on your page earlier. I flipped over and saw her. She's doing some similar style work. So do you guys work together on that stuff at all, completely separately?
No.
You're you've been tattooing longer. You're a more experienced tattooer. Do you feel like that she's come along and is learning from you? Do you find that you get much from her? Or it's just completely separate? Like
Completely separate.
Tattoo lives are separate.
Yeah, because I just feel like if the tattoo life was a big part of it, we might like bump heads. You know, because I have pretty high expectations when it comes to it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be picking at her stuff too much, so we kind of just leave it to the side. But if she asks for tips or pointers, I'll tell her.
Yeah. Does she do that much? Not really.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So doing, I think a lot of people. So you identified a style that's working really well for you, and you're able to stay booked, tattoo regularly, and do something that that keeps you entertained. One thing that we got a lot of tattooers that are 1 to 2 to 3 years in, and they're trying to grab on to something like that really quickly. Like before they've really gotten their feet wet, they're trying to grab on and be like, oh, I'm a neo-traditional tattooer. It's like, well, you're barely a tattooer. How can you already be a neo-traditional tattooer? Any advice? I say this because you just said a few minutes ago that you had done other styles of tattooing leading up to this. Any advice for people that feel like they need to grab onto a style super quickly or early on in their careers?
I would say try everything first.
Yeah.
Because you might like something that you didn't think you would like. Yeah. And also those other styles help you in your tattooing. You know, like for example, knowing how to do a portrait will help you make smooth black and gray. You know, knowing how to do traditional will help you know contrast between black and then color.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And breathing room.
Yeah. So. And you said you did some straight kind of traditional work before you got into this. So I would imagine being super line-based, like that, nothing could help more than being a traditional tattooer.
And then the skin breaks. You know, like traditional has a lot of skin breaks, so that's what helps with my contrast.
Yeah. That's something that I'm glad you brought up. As far as laying out these big pieces, you're saying you start with with dots that are kind of further apart. You start with your lights and build to your darks, but it's probably super important in that style of tattoo on a large scale, well, on any scale, but especially on a large scale, to step back and make sure that you are using big chunks of light and dark and balancing the pieces as a whole. Those pieces can get super heavy and like out of balance really easily, huh?
Really easy.
Yeah. So is that something? Do you like step away, get back?
It depends on the piece. Yeah. Like if it was a back piece, yeah. On an arm, it's kind of like right there, so it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. I'm glad that was the other point I was thinking of making. Thinking about people I think are doing it and doing a nice job. We were talking about our mutual friend Nico Russan, who watches the show. Hopefully he's watching this.
Nico! Probably on his motorcycle.
Yeah, he's probably he's watching on his bike, cruising through the Swiss Alps or something. He's doing a great job of balancing it and using really like bold, sculpted big lines in addition to really thin lines and things like that. Dark areas, light areas. You're doing a lot of the same, and I think that probably if you look at some people who would be on the less experienced, more amateur side, it's that lack of balance, probably even more than lack of technique, that stands out as the error, huh?
Yeah,
I think so too. So if people want to find you, are you booking, or are your books closed? Or
I'm doing consultations again in March, but for 2019 it's pretty much done.
Pretty much done. So I was just talking to Kevin Dickinson about this. He's booking like 3-month blocks. What's your theory as far as taking appointments, taking on new projects? What's your process? My
process is I block out dates during the year that I know I want to take trips, whether if I have something planned or not, and I just book the whole year. And I do that because I know where I want to be like pretty much every week.
Okay. So you plan the whole year. So if you're traveling for whatever, whether it's for convention, for like vacation, for whatever, book that on the front end, and then you're willing to book. Like you'd be willing to book December 2019 right now, as long as you're in town. Yep. Okay. Yeah. We were talking, and I guess because you're doing similar work, I would imagine that people come to you just wanting what you do, and they don't have a ton of input. Or am I wrong about that? A lot of them, some do, but a lot of them they like my stuff, so they just tell me the main things they want. And then they just let me go with it. Okay, yeah. So that makes it a little easier. We were talking with Kevin earlier about it, and it's like the thing I struggle with is booking. So like right now, this is mid-January, I'm booking mid-June, and by the time we get to when I'm ready to draw for those June appointments, I've completely forgotten the consultation. I don't remember the person that well. I don't remember their like mannerisms, what they what they were into, what they were really excited about. I'm just reliant on my notes, and I found that it makes it a lot harder to do the drawing. Probably in your case, not as much because they came to you for that specific.
Yeah. And then I write a bunch of notes, and then that same day I tell them to send me things that they like, and especially things they don't like. And I ask for the things they don't like because then I just avoid all that completely. So I don't even think about drawing that.
Gotcha. Is there anything consistent? So they're sending you other pattern-based work that they don't like, or other Dotwork kind of tattoos that they don't.
Stuff of mine and stuff of others.
Okay.
Yeah, but I always tell them just tell me mine, even if they don't like it, because it helps me not draw that way.
Yeah. That's a that's a good approach. So when people come in and they say there are a handful of things that they definitely want, is it imagery or is it just types of patterns or is it everything?
Sometimes it's imagery and sometimes it's a feeling. So sometimes they want it to be very earthy looking. Sometimes they want it to be very geometric.
Yeah. So when you're doing something like if they want an actual thing, so like yesterday you were working with a flower, are you using a reference that is like real? Are you pulling up photos of roses and trying to convert them so you're not?
I convert them,
Yeah. What's your process for that? Are you just looking at it and drawing it and
I look at it and I just start making blocky shapes. And then I just whatever looks cool, and then it looks cool. I'm like, there it is.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. But all right. So if people want, you said this year's pretty much done, and people wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Email. Email's the best way.
Which is Charlie at
gurutattoo.com.
Charlie at gurutattoo.com. If they want to find you on Instagram, it's just Charlie C.
Tattoo.
Tattoo.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun. Cool. Thank you guys, as always. We'll see you next time. Go to firesidetattoo.com and click on something. There's all kinds of good stuff there, like videos of me, fresh biscuits. Bye. Have a good night. See you guys next time.